Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Hug. Today I'm doing a review for Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the third series or third trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings series. And this review will have spoilers for the previous series, but not for this book specifically, since all of the series kind of build upon each other. So there may be some spoilers for the Farseer trilogy and the Live Ship Traders trilogy, but not for this book. In this series, we are back to following Fitz, who we followed in the first trilogy of the Farseer trilogy, but this takes place about 10 years after the events of the end of the Farseer trilogy. And in that time, Fitz has traveled around a little bit, but mostly he has now settled down and been living essentially as a hermit. There's a boy that he's kind of adopted that lives with him, but other than that, he's been living out on his own, and most people do not know that he's even alive, so he's kind of receded into being more anonymous, and he has been left in peace. There are a couple of people who still know he's alive, but mostly he's been left in peace. But at the beginning of this book, some of the few people who know he's alive start showing up at his door because things are starting to shift and move again, and the catalyst may be needed again. Also during this time, Catrican has been ruling the 6 duchies. She has her son Dutiful, who is growing up and will eventually inherit. Shade has become Catrican's counselor and has a more prominent role in the kingdom. And the Fool has been off in Bingtown with the live ships and has gained a fortune. And now he has come back to the 6 duchies with a new identity when he comes to find Fitz and start off this story. The driver for this story is really that Prince Dutiful has disappeared. Now, Prince Dutiful has the skill, and some think may also have the wit, and there are plots against him, of course, because he is the prince, but he has recently disappeared and someone has to subtly track him down. And so of course they bring Fitz back into the picture. So Fitz gets pulled back into the politics of the 6 duchies. He gets pulled back into service to the crown to track down and save the prince. So as I said, we're back to following Fitz and the Fool. They're teaming up again as the prophet and the catalyst to change the course of history. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about this book is that since it's following up with Fitz 10 years later, I think he's like in his 30s now, and he's older and he's more mature, and he's also a little bit more melancholy. But I thought the change in his character over time was interesting. It was interesting to see him as an older, like he's not like super old, but to see that he's grown up. He's not a teenager anymore. He's not in his 20s anymore, and how time has changed him. And I actually liked his character better in this than I did in the original trilogy, because I feel like having time and freedom has really let him develop a real personality. I felt like I got a better idea and feel for who is Fitz and what is his personality from this one book than the entire Farseer trilogy. Because my main impression of him from the Farseer trilogy is just he's loyal and stupid, and that was it. I had no other idea what his character was like. And this one, I definitely got a better feel for who he is as a person and how he thinks about things, kind of what his process is. I think he's become a more thoughtful person and less foolhardy. And I really liked getting to know more about him as a character and to see how he has changed and grown, and now that he's like fully an adult, who is he? And as I said, he is a little bit melancholy, but I still think his character is very interesting. Now, a lot of that is established towards the beginning of the book, but I think over the course of the story, he does fall back into some old patterns, which I think made sense, but I was also kind of disappointed in, because as I said, having this freedom and like time to himself allowed him to really develop himself as a person and like have his own personality and make his own decisions and not be bound so tightly by loyalty. But once he gets dragged back into the politics and service to the crown and all of that, and he gets, again, reinvested in that concept of loyalty above all else, he falls back into old habits. And again, I felt like it kind of flattened his personality out a little bit, which makes sense that you go back to like a situation from your past and you fall back into those old habits. But I was kind of disappointed that that happened, because I was so excited about this more fully developed version of Fitz. One of the things that was most prominent to me about this book was also the pacing. I feel like it was very clearly divided into like 3 sections. So the first third of this book, the first 200 pages, I was reading and I was like, this is not the plot. This is like, we're not in the plot yet for the first 200 pages of this book, because that first third is really just playing catch up. We're being reminded of what happened in the previous series, which I found very helpful because I read that series like 2 years ago and I don't totally remember everything. And there was stuff that I was like, that happened? Oh my God, I forgot. So I'm like glad that that was there. And then we're also catching up with like, what have you been doing in the last 10 years? What has Fitz been up to? What's been going on in the six duchies and in the world? So it's a lot of playing catch up in that first 200 pages of the book, and really not the plot yet. The next like 200-ish pages, so that second third, was like moving towards the plot, but still not totally there. It was this like limbo kind of feeling. That second third is just a lot of like tracking. So it still didn't feel like it was like totally into the plot, but it was getting there. And then that last third was really like where we hit all of the plot. Everything happened and it just like really all like came into place, and we found out so much information in those last 200 pages of the book. Now, my thoughts and experience of reading this was that in that first 200 pages that I said was like clearly not the plot, it was really just playing catch up, that was my favorite part of the book, because I really read Robin Hobb's books for her writing. I really like her writing. I like her world building. I like her characters. I think she is a really good writer, but I don't like her plots. And so that first 200 pages was my favorite part, because it wasn't the plot. It was really just living with these characters, living in this world, hearing stories about their lives, catching up, and also really focusing on like the relationships of these characters, because all of these people who have mostly been leaving Fitz in peace are starting to come back into his life as like the wheels of history are starting to turn again, and they're starting to need his help. And so we get to learn more about his relationship to Shade, his relationship to the Fool, and like the way that Fitz relates to even himself and like thinks about himself. And that's my favorite kind of thing. And then we got to the last third that was really where everything happened, and I was just like, oh, I don't like this anymore. And I was a little disappointed in that, because I wanted to love it, because I had been enjoying this book so much up until that point. But personally, I don't love her plots, and so that was my least favorite part of the book, when the actual plot started happening. But 2/3 of this book I really enjoyed. One thing though that I also want to say about her books though is that she needs to stop killing animals in her books. So many of her books involve animals dying, especially these books that follow Fitz and the Fool. And one, I hate it just because I hate it when animals die. But two, it's starting to feel like it happens so frequently that I don't know, it starts to feel almost manipulative to me, because the thing is, you know that killing animals in books is a fast, easy way to force emotions. Like, you know people are gonna get emotional about that. And so when it happens so frequently, it starts to feel like an easy way to like force emotion in your readers, and I just don't like that. It feels manipulative and I'm not into it. Aside from the fact that I just don't like it when animals die. I don't like how frequently she does it and the way that it's done, that it just don't like it. I also didn't like the ending of this book. I felt like it was too tidy in comparison to the rest of the story, and it's a complaint that I've had about some of her previous books as well, that I feel like her stories are very realistically messy, but then the ending is so tidy that it doesn't match the rest of the story, and I dislike that, and it just, I feel like it cheapens the horrible things that these characters have gone through, or the terrible choices they've had to make up until this point. So I was not a fan of the ending. Like, I didn't hate the ending, but I was very disappointed in the ending of this book. Even so, overall, I did really like this book because, as I said, 2/3 of it, I was very into it. And I think that if you're somebody who likes Robin Hobb's plots, then you'll love this because it still has her great writing and world building and characters and all of that, and it very much feels like a Robin Hobb plot. I just happen to not like the way that she does plots. So overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed most of the book. And I have a feeling that this one may be my favorite in the trilogy because it had that beginning, that slow start that really focused on the characters in the world. And now that Fitz is back into this world and into these politics, we may not get that opportunity again for that slow, character-focused, just living in their life and in this world kind of story. So I am glad that I got that in this book, but I am interested to read the rest of the series. So that is all for my review of Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!